This video is brought to you by Mountain Dew Voltage. Only the best for the best. Over the weekend, I really got to thinking about my brother's situation with the Twilight Cup. And I guarantee that there are a lot of people out there like my brother that don't want to spend a ton of dust this month on the Twilight Cup. So I thought, what would be a good team that doesn't cost a lot of dust? Can you build a top tier team with only 10,000 Stardust second moves? Because that would mean that your entire team, short of powering them up, would only cost 60,000 dust. That's if you had a second charge move on every single Pokemon. Then I got to thinking that there's just so many Pokemon that you're going to miss out on because they don't have a 10,000 Stardust second move cost. So I thought, well, let's say 100,000 is the maximum you want to spend. So I tried to come up with a team of 6 Pokemon that you could only spend 100,000 Stardust on. Boy, was that difficult. The whole idea here is that either you spend dust to get a second move or you forfeit the second move. And how good is the team going to be if the maximum amount of dust that you can spend on unlocking moves is 100,000? So here's what I came up with. Still, of course, following my similar format of a point, an anchor, and a mid. I have shield busters, mids, and heavy hitters in this team. These 6 Pokemon that I chose, I took down how much they're going to cost, where they fall in line to being a mid, an anchor, a point, how they end up falling in line with all of that stuff, how fast they are, how heavy they hit, and took in their vulnerabilities, their resistances. Kind of did a little bit of calculating on that end. Here we have a spreadsheet that I pulled from a Reddit thread of all of the Pokemon that are available in the Twilight Cup. And the only thing that I added was a dust cost column. Basically, how much dust does it cost to buy their second charge move? So here you can see we have Bulbasaur, which costs 10,000. The only odd ones here are like the babies, where you have Badoo costs 1,000, Togepi, Igglybuff. Those are still 10,000 Stardust Pokemon. They only can be unlocked at the baby form. They are still valid Pokemon, so I did consider them. Unfortunately, none of them made my team. But so the only drawback to having like Badoo is that if you're gonna go for like Roserade, then you're going to have to trade, which costs you an extra variable amount of dust depending on how good a friend you are with somebody and all kinds of things like that. So I decided to just kind of keep those out of my team. But if you can get out for 100,000 or less, Roserade's definitely a good option. He just has some really bad weaknesses. Anyways, so you have all of these 10,000 cost Pokemon right here. Then we move down to the 50,000s, starting with Ekans. And that goes all the way down to Mr. Mime, which I thought it was weird that Mr. Mime cost 75,000, but the other regionals cost 50. The other Kanto regionals. Then you have like Umbreon, Tyranitar, Drapion, of course, are the 75,000s. I tried to stay away from these, even though when we get to my team, I could have easily done a 75,000 because I only ended up buying 2 charge moves other than a high cost charge move. Anyways, and then Giratina, of course, you could blow all of your wad onto Giratina if, you could get a Giratina that low. Is that even possible? I actually want to have a little bit of fun with this. I want to challenge you guys, before you see my team, I want to challenge you guys to see if you guys could come up with a group of 6 Pokemon that cost you under 100,000. What is the best possible team that you could come up with? I think my team is pretty solid. It's got a little bit of weakness, which we'll talk about here in a second. But I want to challenge you guys and see if you guys can do it, because I think that thinking about the Pokemon in a terms of resource cost really can put into perspective how necessary Pokemon are. Because after I did this, I honestly could see myself running this team. I've already spent a ton of dust powering up Pokemon that I probably shouldn't have. Anyways, after doing this team, I definitely feel like this is actually a pretty solid team. So let's actually get into that. So first on my team is actually going to be Mightyena, and I actually do buy a second charge move for Mightyena. So I have Bite, Play Rough, and Poison Fang on my Mightyena. So that actually sets me up with a really wide set of coverage in terms of typing as far as attacking goes. As far as defense, he's only a dark type, which means he's only going to have a couple of weaknesses. And he's definitely one of those Pokemon that falls into the mid-range of like how fast he charges energy and how much damage he can do, which I really like. I think having a mid with a wide spread of move types really sets them up to be able to handle whatever you can throw at them. So I definitely think that if I'm going to have Mightyena as a mid, I want it to have as much coverage as possible. So as you can see, Bug, Fairy, and Fighting are my only weaknesses, and I do resist Ghost, Dark, and Psychic with Mightyena. So this one is the one that I am most worried about. I actually changed around the team a little bit from my first draft because I was pretty weak to Psychic, and I wanted to get out of that Psychic hole because I knew Venomoth was going to be like a heavy hitter for me. Next, we actually have Golbat. So originally in this slot, I did have Alolan Raticate. I did figure out that Alolan Raticate being quad weak to fighting was going to really hurt whenever I came across a Toxicroak, because I do have a couple of other Pokemon that are pretty weak to fighting. So I wanted to switch that up a little bit as well. So Golbat here, I do buy the second move on him. I actually have it as Wing Attack, Shadow Ball, and then Poison Fang. So that gives me a pretty wide set of moves to use on Golbat as well. He is a shield buster, in my opinion. He does fall in line with where he can generate quite a bit of energy, but he's not going to do super amounts of damage. Shadow Ball does do a decent amount of damage. The fact that it's not a stab move on Golbat does kind of, make it a little weaker. But all in all, I think that he is going to be a really solid Pokemon. He has tons of resistances here. 3 quad resistances. And then he has a few vulnerabilities, which it's all good. He's pretty solid, in my opinion. Next, we have Alolan Ninetales. So Alolan Ninetales is actually one of those Pokemon that becomes a mid. So I tried to equip it with varying move types. The problem is that it's a 50,000 dust cost, and I did not want to spend a large chunk of my resources onto this type of Pokemon. Because Ice and Dark are its fast moves, the best, if you wanted to have 3 different move coverages, you could do Dark, Ice, and Fairy. But the fact that it has access to an Ice fast move really makes it just really strong where it's at. You don't, in my opinion, I don't need a second charge move on my Alolan Ninetales. Ice and Fairy are going to do perfect. They're both stab. They're both going to be hitting for weaknesses in this cup. So I really think that not wasting the resources to buy a charge move on Alolan Ninetales is completely okay. So as you can see, we're vulnerable to Fire, Poison, Rock, and Steel here, being quad weak to Steel. Fortunately, there's not too many Steel threats out there. Nidoking is one, and Mawile is another, but both of those are really being shunned by the community, so I don't think you're going to have too much trouble trying to get around the Steel there. You do have a quad resistance to Dragon here, and then a few more resistances, which actually do line up pretty well. Bug being one of the types that people go after a lot to try to counter the actual typings of this meta. Dark being in the meta, and then Ice being another one that you actually want to go for. People are going to be shooting for ice. Those are really, really nice resistances. Next we have Venomoth. So Venomoth is my Toxicroak killer. Because I knew how difficult it would be to get around Toxicroak, I knew that Venomoth was going to be a good choice here. Now, the special thing about Venomoth is that Venomoth doesn't even need a second charge move. It's nice to have one if you can get Poison Fang, but otherwise you don't really need it. So I would personally go with Confusion and then Silverwind here, and that really sets him up to be a really good shield buster. Confusion generates quite a bit of good energy, and then Silverwind being such a low cost move, you can really push out the damage. Psychic will help you cover your Toxicroak, and then Bug will help you cover the dark types and, you know, a lot of different typings there. The only problem is that Venomoth has some weaknesses that make it pretty vulnerable here. Fire, we're not too worried about unless Skuntank happens to bring it. Flying, that means we're weak to Golbat. Psychic, which means we're weak to ourselves, as Venomoth usually has Confusion in this meta, and Rock types, which we're not super worried about. But we do have some decent resistances here, mainly the quad weak resistance to fighting, which means when we go up against our Toxicroak, we're going to be resisting a ton of damage from him. We actually also resist poison. We're not super vulnerable to ground, which means that Toxicroak literally has no super effective answer to us. He's at best going to do neutral damage with his Mud Bomb. So I like that. Next we have Skuntank, which is actually not a Pokemon that I bought a second charge move for. Skuntank is definitely going to be a heavy hitter. He falls in line with he's not super fast at generating energy, but his charge moves do hit pretty hard. I have him down as Poison Jab and Crunch personally. I think those two moves will set you up very nicely. Poison Jab generates a lot of energy compared to Bite. Bite does do more damage, but Poison Jab just generates the energy faster to get to that Crunch even quicker. Having Poison and Dark will really set you up for a decent coverage against what's in the meta. The only vulnerability he has is ground typing. So, oh my gosh, that's amazing. He actually resists Dark, Ghost, Grass, Poison, and Psychic. So he's actually going to be doing a nice little bit of resistance there, which in my opinion sets Skuntank up really well. I don't think you necessarily need his second move in this scenario, but he's really nice. Last but definitely not least, we actually do have our Toxicroak, which Toxicroak is the one that I spent my 50,000 dust on. So as you can see back in our spreadsheet, Toxicroak and Croagunk do end up in this 50,000 slot, which I feel like Toxicroak is probably the most important Pokemon, having the fighting fast move. The fighting typing in general is going to really put him in a very good position. But as you can see, I only bought two 10,000 charge moves. So that means that if I wanted to, I could actually have gone for the Drapion, I could have gone for a Gardevoir, I could have gone for a Tyranitar. Those are all very nice. Actually, Tyranitar has Iron Tail. Ooh. So those are all actually nice options, and I'm going to leave that up to you guys for your teams. If you guys feel like Drapion is more important than Toxicroak, if Tyranitar is more important than Toxicroak, that's up to you guys. I personally feel like my Toxicroak needs to be on my team. It's just it's almost like the core of any team that I build this month. So I feel like he's just such a good necessity, and he's a great Pokemon to have two charge moves on. So I actually have him down as having Counter, and then Mud Bomb, and then Sludge Bomb. So the reason that I go for Sludge Bomb instead of Dynamic Punch is because people are going to be running the counters for Toxicroak anyways. People are going to be running Venomoth for the Psychic attack. They're going to be running Golbat for the flying attacks. So I know that they're going to be running all these crazy things, and fighting isn't really going to help any of that. So at worst, I'll be doing Sludge Bomb and just kind of go after things that aren't a direct counter. Because if you're already going to be weak to counter, counter is just so good that you could just keep pushing and keep getting energy for it, and then just throw off whatever you want. That's going to be a little controversial. You could go with Dynamic Punch and literally just win more off Dynamic Punch, but that's completely up to you guys. when you make your teams. So as you can see, we're going to be weak to flying, ground, and psychic, which that one is a quad weakness, which really hurts. We are going to resist quite a bit of things. Bug is actually a quad resistance, and then we have dark, fighting, grass, poison, and rock. Where does that leave my team? So I have it written down here, which I know you guys can't read. So after everything, after all of the weaknesses and resistances, here's what I'm super weak to. Rock. And rock is not very prevalent. So the rock type weakness is really going to hurt me. So the only things that I could think of is that Swallow has some rock type moves, and Nidoqueen also has rock type moves. So kind of an issue if somebody just happens to have an anti-meta pick that ends up having some nice rock type moves. I know people, because of how good Golbat and Crobat are becoming, I know people are trying to equip their Nidoqueens with Stone Edge. That is becoming more prevalent because that is a good alternative to a rock type fast move, which not a lot of Pokemon have. And then I'm also going to be weak to fire, poison, flying, and psychic all evenly. They're all going to have the same kind of effect towards my typings. So that brings up Venonat, Alolan Ninetales, Crobat, Golbat. Poison types in general are just going to be rampant. Skuntank and Mightyena are also going to be an issue for me. But I feel like this is a pretty solid team. It's not as meta as could be, but it's definitely a fairly strong team, and it only cost me 100,000 dust to make. And I still have quite a bit of room. I have 30,000 dust that I could really spend if I wanted to. I just don't think that any of it's necessary. With this team, I really don't feel like I need those second charge moves on an Alolan Ninetales, Venomoth, or Skuntank. I feel like it's pretty solid the way it is. This is my request to you guys. Do you think that you can create a team for only 100,000 dust and make it meta relevant? Do you think that it could win more rounds than it loses in a tournament? That's my question. I'm trying to spark a discussion here. I want to see if you guys can create a team just under 100,000 dust. If you want me to, I'll actually upload this spreadsheet to make it a little easier for you. I'll upload it and throw it up in the description so that you guys can look at it. Otherwise, that's actually all I have for today. Today is Monday. There's nothing new. Oh, I did want to talk really fast. Apparently, we have some weird stuff going on. Smeargle is definitely becoming a thing. So they just tweeted out this morning, 56 minutes ago as of recording. Since not every trainer has finished their quest for Find Celebi yet, it's time to lend a hand to make a new friend today. So that doesn't mean anything on the surface, but the fact that they're promoting a special research really makes me think that they could be doing Smeargle. You see Smeargle in a special research. It's possible. So you have their logo that now has green splooge on it. Their banner has green splooge, and they've been putting it in some of their pictures. So I don't know exactly when they're going to do Smeargle, but it seems to be more and more prevalent as the days go on. Hopefully tomorrow at 4 p.m. they just surprise us with it, considering that Tuesday is a good day for, this company to release things. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think we're going to get Smeargle? Let me know what you have to say about teams that cost less than 100,000 Stardust down below. I really would like to theorycraft and see what you guys can come up with. If you like to like videos, make sure you do that. Otherwise, you could be that guy. But please let me know what you have to say down in the comments below. And until tomorrow, guys, I will see you later.